DM Maynard uses her expertise in teaching to present workshops around the world to empower the voices of the partners of trans and gender non-binary people and the parents and families of trans and non-binary children and the educators of trans students. She is the author of the Reflective Workbook for Partners and Transgender People, your transition as your partner transitions, and she'll be hosting a conference for the spouses and partners of trans folk later this year. Tonight, she'll be working through some of the exercises from her book while providing some much needed guidance you can use while on your journey as your partner of a trans and non-binary individual. So with that, I'm turning the event over to you, Dee. Welcome, Dee. We're so happy that you're here.
Thank you, Bethany. Thanks so much for this invitation. I'm so excited to be here today. And I like cake and pie and dumplings, just for the record. A great way to start off, makes me hungry right away. So the name of this workshop presentation is Your Transition as Your Partner Transitions. And yes, I am DM Maynard. I use she, her, hers pronouns. And I just want, before I start, I think it's very important that people understand that sometimes when we talk about things that are hard, for some people, the topic we're talking about could be difficult or challenging right now, that if we say anything or I say anything that's triggering, please feel free to know that your mental health and the way you feel is most important, because sometimes we forget about our own self-care. So maybe it might be best for you to shut off for a moment, take a deep breath, come back on, or view the rest of it later at a time that feels comfortable for you. I would like to let you know that this is the second part of the title of the book that I wrote, which we can go to the next slide if we'd like. It's called the Reflective Workbook for Partners of Transgender People, Your Transition as Your Partner Transitions. And I'm an educator, as you mentioned. I taught in the classroom for more than 30 years. This is my first love. I think it is an honor to teach in any capacity, whether it's children or adults, but my passion for more than 30 years is working in the classroom. And my spouse transitioned after us being together for around 17 years. And I identify as a partner of a trans person. And after presenting in some conferences, I started taking notes and writing things down about some of the questions that people were asking me, and I was formulating ideas for a workbook. And I'm happy to say that Jessica Kinsey Publishers were gracious enough to publish my book. So I am a professional author now, and we can use the next slide. And so what happened, what evolved at the first workbook became, once parents were hearing about the first book, many spoke to me, because as an educator, I was going to some parents' open parent and family workshops, and a lot of parents learned about the first workbook and were using it and said, I only wish we had one for ourselves. And so then I spoke with my publisher, and then the second book, the Reflective Workbook for Parents and Families of Transgender and Non-Binary Children, Your Transition as Your Child Transitions came to be. And as an educator, and I know you are too, Bethany, we know the importance of this type of book in the classroom and for school districts and school systems. It's called the Reflective Workbook for Teachers and Support Staff of Trans and Non-Binary Students. Your schools transition as your students transition. So we can go to the next slide. Oh, that's my information. Feel free, I will email you back. dmmaynardworkbook@gmail.com, and you can go to the next slide. So let me explain how this all came about. When I learned that my partner needed to transition, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know who to turn to. I didn't know how it was going to affect my life, my partner's life, or our life together. And so I started doing research and trying to look for books and different types of resources to help me navigate my spouse's transition. And I mostly found memoirs. I found most things focusing on the person in transition, which is fantastic and very necessary. But I couldn't find anything that helped the partner sort out, navigate the transition from themselves. And so after presenting so often, the people that I presented workshops for, which were all around the world, I decided, as I mentioned, to compile a lot of the questions, and then I had lots of exercises, and then I had people telling me their stories, so I wanted to include that. And so I thought, let me see if I can put this into some type of format that would be really make it easier for partners to be able to explore their own journey during this process. And so they can take this resource and bring it into the privacy of their home, or use it with a therapist, or use it with their partner. So I asked partners the topics that matter the most to them, and they discussed these main topics: unexpected and confused. When people come to my workshops or have worked with me through interviews, and group sessions, really, too. I'm not a therapist, but people sometimes conjugate after the workshops when we talk about things together as a group. They would really talk about, especially in the early stages, that they might have been, some of the things were unexpected to them, and they were a little confused about what this meant for them. And they had a lot of questions. So the second chapter really focuses a lot on this. The first chapter explains a lot about the book, the setup, and what to do. The third chapter is who are you? It discusses pronouns, how partners may feel about that, about names, chosen names, the pronouns that a person uses to identify themselves, and how that learning all of that for themselves works, and also about different artifacts that a person, as they're transitioning or in part of their transition process, might ask a partner or spouse to please take down, no longer show, be visible. And for many partners, that can sometimes be very painful and hard, and other times certain things, or altogether, it could be simple. So this type of discussion really really requires a lot of communication between partners. Grief may apply. There are some people who don't grieve, but there are partners that do grieve or are going through different parts of grieving. I use a lot of information from based on Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and David Kessler's work. So we talked a lot about that in the book. About other topics that were important is information about medically and socially transitioning and how a person feels about that, and what role they may or might not play as their partner is transitioning. And their partner may not transition medically, they may transition socially, they may do medically, not socially, they may not transition in any visible way. However, it's really important to talk about the options and have communication with that. How to come out to family and friends. So when these chapters occur, there's all different pieces to this. There is no one way that fits everybody. It gives you options and talks about different things that you might want to process. And so we talk about coming out to family members and friends and different ways to do it, and a timeline, and lots of what exercises do with that. And then we talk about whether you want to come out at work or not come out at work, and why you would come out at work, and when, and to whom would you come out to work. Talk about all the different types of documents that could be changed, and who's going to change them, and how that process is going to happen. The awareness of all of this, how you deal with insurances sometimes, I don't give specifics on which insurances, specific ones, but more how to talk to people on the phone when you're inquiring about the information. I wrote scripts to help you be able to navigate that when you're making phone calls about it. Talk about the gender markers change, possible change, And also, very important, the loss and gain of privilege and how this affects everybody individually, whether you may lose a community that you are very close to, whether it is an LGBTQ community, whether it is a religious community. It can be losing privileges as far as job, career. It can be in a specific pertaining to race, feeling safe, not safe in certain circumstances. It goes into in depth. It talks about the importance. Partners wanted to talk about finding a therapist and what they look for in a therapist and what's important. A major part of this next chapter is very important when I do workshops about partners and sex and how a partner feels about different aspects of sex and intimacy once they learn that their partner needs to transition. And then we talk about celebrations because they come in different shapes and sizes, in small ways and big ways. And in that chapter, we also talk about celebrating how you answer inappropriate questions, because they're often a lot. I found that a lot of people talked about how often people who don't know about the transgender community and have very little experience talking to a partner of a person who's in transition or thinking along that line, they ask inappropriate questions because they don't want to ask the person who's questioning their gender. And so they often ask it of the partner. And so there's a lot about that in that chapter. And then taking the pulse of the relationship. Once the discussion about transitioning is not first and foremost in the relationship, because could be a very long period of time where a person's transition needs to take front stage and needs to be often discussed. But it's really important to remember that the partner is a big part of this process and that their voice matters and their needs matter along the way. Okay. Next slide. And so one of the things that partners talked about a lot was that the language, and if you come from a community or a place where you really don't have any experience with the language, some people still believe that the word queer is a negative word and come from a space because that's how they were raised, but that's been their experience. And so we talk about language, we talk about the certain differences. Some people don't even know what LGBTQ plus stands for. They don't know what LGBTQIAA stands for. They don't know a lot of things about even that term. And so really we talk in this all different definitions to help people. And then there's tons and tons of resources at the end of the book and different ways to get in touch with different organizations. Okay, next slide.
Dee, can I just interject for
a
question really quick?
Go right ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have an individual that was asking that, saying that they don't necessarily have a partner, they're not necessarily a spouse, but what would be your advice on how to tell someone that you're interested in them about your transition and how to go about that in terms of a relationship?
Well, I'm a partner, so I mean, I'll answer what I would say, but I don't know if I'm the most qualified to answer that question, to be quite frank with you. It may be best for a person who is in transition to ask other people who have gone through that experience for themselves. I know that based on what partners have told me and those that I have, couples that I've spoken to, that when they were dating, some people chose to tell someone upfront about them in transition or that they are transgender or non-binary. Others have felt it's no one's business until they got closer and they found it was the right time. I feel that it's important maybe to practice whatever you're going to say with someone ahead of time. It could be a therapist, could be, again, in a support group. I know that there are many of them out there. There are lots of things online where people speak about this. So I hope that I answered that question the best that I could. I really feel that it's a personal decision and a person needs to do what feels right for them. Again, it's not one size fits all, in my opinion.
Thank you. Yeah, that definitely helps. The individual replied that was helpful. Thank you.
I'm so happy. Thank you so much. That makes me feel so glad. Okay.
Oh, Corinne also chimed in asking, like, an example, ask about how we can disclose that to a partner, like how I'm going to just read this word for word if that's okay.
Okay, sure.
An example is, I'm just reading this on the fly. I'm sorry.
No.
Like, as an example, my therapist said to practice ahead and then do it at a restaurant because people behave when in public. So kind of like, how do we disclose that? Like, and maybe what kind of settings? We maybe know that our partners are going to behave differently in different spaces.
You mean telling your partner that you're transitioning in a public place? Is that what you're
I think so. Yes.
Oh, well,
like taking the partner's feelings into account.
Taking the partner's what?
Like taking the partner's feelings into account. How do we disclose that to them in a way that they're going to like best receive it?
Well, again, I really think this depends. This is really a question for therapists, but I'll do my best. Because what I would say to that, as based on experiences speaking to other partners, is that it really depends on the health of the relationship before. And I think that this is something that is personal between two people. So I don't know if I would really feel that most people would want to hear something private about this if they have feelings about it in a public place. I'd say go somewhere that is safe for both of you, that you can hear each other well, where there's not noise and atmosphere behind you, that you're not shouting over something. I would say really make sure that the next day that person the partner may not be as busy as they would have normally been in their schedule. So they need time to process it, that they can do it and have the next day or a few hours at least to do it. If you have children, I would also say maybe have time that your partner was going, both of you might still have time like away somewhere. I think that it's important to ask the partner how they feel about this, and to sometimes the person who is in transition, they have been thinking about this for a really long time in different ways. And they've been processing maybe with a therapist. They have perhaps told a close friend. Maybe they've done some investigating online. They've read some books. And perhaps their partner has an idea because they've spoken about it in some ways. But sometimes they really don't know. That's why that second chapter is unexpected. And so it may be something that a person who's in transition is bursting with pride and joy, and understandably so, to share with someone. However, for their partner, it could be a little overwhelming, and at the same time, it can also be exciting, and it can be one or the other of both. So I think that respecting the importance of this kind of conversation by doing it somewhere private and not in a restaurant. Now, if the question also involves maybe once you know the person is in transition or is perhaps changing their pronouns to align with the pronouns that they should be using, that is what I'm saying should, meaning that they feel people should be using, because it is the pronouns they use, that and they wanted to have it align with their firm gender. Sometimes the spouse is in a situation, I know that I write about this, that they're in a place where their spouse is being misgendered. and the partner isn't sure what to do. And so I think it's in those situations, I feel that the people in the relationships, and I want to acknowledge that people are also in poly relationships, and that we always have to be aware that there's more than one type of configuration. We're not always in monogamous relationships, or we're dating many people, or people have open relationships, so we should acknowledge that. But right now I'm going to use it in terms of you with one person at a time, is that so if you're in a relationship with someone and they're misgendered, it's important that before you go to that restaurant or the public space, because maybe that's what was being asked as part of this question, is to discuss how you're going to handle if somebody misgenders someone. Are you going to repeat to the waiter, or like I always suggest if somebody misgenders someone and says she instead of he for a person, you might say, oh no, he would rather have that cooked rare, and say the pronoun in the conversation so the waiter or waitress or person would know, or use they if that's the pronoun, or whatever pronoun the person's name if that's their pronoun. And to be aware of when sometimes making, I don't want to say the word is, well, the first term that came to word, making a scene. I can say that sometimes when a person means well and tries to help, they cause discomfort to a person who is in transition or transitioning. And so it's important to have this conversation prior on how you're going to handle being misgendered, a person being misgendered, if that should happen. And so if that happens in a public place, maybe that's part of what the question meant. But if you're going to share with somebody your journey and what you need from them, giving them the respect and grace to speak with them in a private place, and setting it up where there's time the next day to process, and maybe give them some resources. We all know when I consent, okay, and to go ahead and do that.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. That definitely helps answer the question. Thank you so much.
Oh, sure, Bethany. Anything else, or should I go on? What would you prefer me to do?
You can keep going. Perfect.
Okay, so, and this might be some resources people might look to. There's these books, there's tons of them out there. So this one is called Families in Transition, and it is about parenting, but it is also a really important book because it has lots of different chapters and includes things with family dynamics. So I really recommend this book. Love this book, Theorizing Transgender Identity for Clinical Practice, a new model for understanding gender by S.J. Langer. It was one of the top 5 finalists for Lambda Literary for nonfiction in 2020, I believe it was 2020. And great book, wonderful for clinicians and for people who are really interested in an interdisciplinary way of approaching transgender identity, theorizing transgender identity. I think it was a wonderful book. There's another book called Sex, Sexuality, and Trans Identities, Clinical Guidance for Psychotherapists and Counselors. And I'm proud to say that I wrote a chapter in this book, and it was came out of doing a conference with TCGS. And the chapter that I wrote is with Olivia Fisher, wonderful clinician. I interviewed dozens of partners on sex and intimacy, and then 5 partners agreed to have their part of the interview explained in depth in this chapter. And then another great resource is Trans Bodies and Trans Selves, a resource for the transgender community. And now I'm happy to tell you, I believe it's in December, the next version of this book is going to come out. And they asked me to write a short piece in it for partners. And so I'm very excited about this. And so you'll be hearing more about this. So it just so happens that it's coming out in December, and I got word about this week. Okay.
Awesome. I have a question regarding resources.
Sure.
I have an individual that asked about how to help their family navigate through transition, particularly with children. and how to best have those conversations and those discussions to help prepare their children for the next chapter of how their family looks. Can you recommend any resources or literature for that specific need to help a family transition?
I do think families in transition, I mean, that's the title of the book, so there are different parts of that. I also think going to support groups are really great, and speaking with other parents and going to, there's many conferences out there. I presented at many. The Philly conference is great. There's Gender Spectrum. There's tons. There's in New York City. There's tons and tons of resources out there for that. A specific book, this is one I recommend. There's lots of them by Diane Enterson. I would say her last name. I'm trying to think of how to say it. Whatever. Her work is great. I also would say there's another book out right now called, I feel bad, Diane, I'm apologizing. I don't know her well, but I don't know. But anyway, but her books are wonderful. And then there's He Was Always My Son by Janet Barkin. I'm going to be interviewing her on my YouTube monthly series. That would be a great book. So there are lots of resources out there. I mean, actually, the book I just mentioned, some of them are there when your child transitions, but as far as parents transitioning, I would say going to support groups, but I don't know as many as off the top of my head, I do not.
Thank you. No, that definitely helps. I think that we can keep going for now, Dee, and I'll let you know if anything else pops up.
Someone had a recommendation. Love lives here.
Oh, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
Someone had a recommendation. Love lives here. Okay.
Oh, yes, I see that. Yeah, I was also thinking about one. I tried to Google it really quick about a crayon. I think it's called Red. And it's about a crayon story through transition and how it's really, I don't know if that makes sense. It's about a blue crayon mistakenly labeled as red suffers an identity crisis. That's the premise of the book. I feel like that's a good kind of children's book for, like a younger child.
Are you asking about children's books or books that explain a parent transitioning? I thought that's what you were asking me. I'm sorry, I might have misunderstood you.
I think probably either. I think both are probably helpful, but I think I think the question was more kind of stemmed as like, how do we talk to our child about this?
Oh, okay.
And
well,
so
then, that's a different question. I'm sorry, I misunderstood you.
No, it's okay.
So as far as resources for books, some that one I would really recommend, which is, hold on one second, is, you know what, I'll come back to that. Let's go forward. And then, well, I would say one that's really great. Again, it's, there's a lot of information in it by Eli Neely, and it's called Transgender Children and Youth, but it does explain a lot of information in there. If you want children's books, I have a bunch of them mentioned in one by, it's called Be Who You Are, another, I Am Jazz, Stacy's Not a Girl, My Princess Boy. Again, it's more geared around children who are in transition. So, are you a boy?
No, that's really helpful.
Thinker for boys. All right, I gave you a few. Okay, so we go to the next slide. If you want to go to the next one. All right, so I feel that when one of the things that was very important to partners when I spoke with them was that they wanted to have affirmations, anecdotal affirmations that really spoke to them and that was about their journey, and that to do some writing about that. So I created 90 affirmations, almost like it would have been like you might see them on like a calendar sometimes if you were to get one of those calendars that used to like pull off. I'm showing my age there. But it's just like daily readings, but they're embedded inside the book, embedded. And then they wanted to have some areas, so I created vital vignettes where it explains specific information about different things that partners may go through or know other partners have gone through. Then they wanted to have ways to, and exercises, which we can get to whenever we want to, graphics galore to explain different ways to navigate the transition, but not just in the written form, but do it in through different types of Venn diagrams or web, or doing it through games, which learning vocabulary. I have lots and lots of games. There's a whole area that does do reflective responses, which is just in the narrative form. Then there's a section about how to distress, because there are many things that happen in people's lives that during not just, you know, life is going on while people are in transition. So I talk about different ways to distress. There's an empathy embracing exercises, which helps a partner, maybe look at the transition through the lens of their partner who's in transition, or different ways that they've been able to adjust to learning different things in their life that they might not have looked at the same way before. And there's sample shares of lots of partners who answered the different reflective responses, and their samples are all different stages of their partners in all different stages of transitioning. And then there's a couple communication corner where there's exercises for partners and the couple to do with each other and to ask each other, but it's led by the partner. Okay, we go to the next slide. So this is one of the affirmative anecdotes or anecdotal affirmations. What scares me most? What worries me most? How can I take care of me? How can I take care of we? So an exercise I'd like to do for a moment is, would it be possible for people maybe to take a moment to think about when they go to bed at night, what might be something right now in relation to the transition that keeps them awake at night, that worries them, and they have a hard time falling asleep, and maybe we can share some of that. Because the part that is embedded in this anecdotal affirmation is that sometimes the partner loses sight of taking care of themselves, and they're very in tune with taking care of the family and the people involved in the transition, and not necessarily on their own wants and needs, and that gets put on the shelf sometimes. So what worries them, that keeps them up at night? So
can we share some of these out, yeah, or do you just want to read them, Dee?
Yeah, you can share some out, but I'll respond to some I read already myself. It's very, very common, partners in the privacy of the workshops often talk about the fear of their partner wanting to leave them, and that not being attracted to them, and then their partner in transition can also be worried about that. And This sometimes gets wrapped into grieving and fear and the part of the unknown. People talk about the fear of violence, of something happening to their partner, and they're not able to be there for them. We know this happens. I'm reading a book right now, and it's about a parent whose child is in transition, but it happens all the time for partners. Having their partner go into a bathroom, it can be terrorizing and really scary. It can be walking down the street. It can be going into a clothing store. It can be getting your hair cut or done. It can be going to a family function. It can be traveling. It can be getting on a plane. It can be going through security. It can be at any time. It can be going to a doctor's office. There's a lot of fear that's wrapped around that can have the potential of violence, and what to do and how to handle that. And we talk about this a lot in our workshop. Okay. Do you see some others there? I'm trying to see if I see any other questions.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in too. I mean, I feel like as a spouse myself, I can say that I've experienced all of these feelings that are being shared. So they're all very valid.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. And also, not knowing if depending on the partner's, the spouse's sexual fluidity, if they will be attracted to their spouse once the spouse transitions, and how will the configuration be for intimacy and sex. Very scary how it will affect. Someone wrote something about having a child with special needs and how to navigate all of that and explain that. Again, I really believe that the best answer to this is to go to some type of couples counseling and to get some professional help with people who have experienced that type of thing. Also, another thing that people talk about is partners is about trauma. That sometimes when their partner transitions, that they themselves might have had trauma with the someone of the same gender that the spouse is transitioning to, and that can trigger a lot of emotions in a partner who might have had some type of abuse or trauma in their life with a person who's gendered, how their partner may present now, non-binary even too. So that it's really important that mental health professionals, if you find you're having a hard time, get involved, you seek that out. Any other questions that you see, Bethany?
I think that we can keep going.
Okay, so we can, so we have probably like 15 minutes to go. So we can go to the next slide. So this is just a vignette, and not just a vignette, explains a lot of what I said, but most of what is shared in this book is based on, my greatest hope is that the journey and the journeys of those who have so bravely shared their stories with me will bring you, the partner, a sense of comfort and knowledge that you are not alone. I want to emphasize that anything that I voice is simply my path combined with the stories of others, and is not intended to suggest that your path will necessarily be the same as mine or anyone else's. And I think that if there's one takeaway from this is that no one can tell anybody what to do. There'll be lots of people who will give their opinion, but in the end, you have to make the decision that feels right and whole and best for yourself. And then create a support system that can help you along the way with that. Okay, go to the next slide. So these are the type of exercises that are in the book. So one suggestion is that what artifacts does your trans-identified partner want removed that you do not want put, taken down or put out of view. And so in the middle, you write down what that item is, and then the outside, all the different reasons why you don't want it to be taken down, or some people just choose to use this exercise that they put the artifact, the word artifact in the middle, and then they list all the different artifacts. And then they talk about their partner, and they have communicate about the reasons why each one of them might want the things to be in view. For instance, wedding pictures. It could be trips. It can be different types of holiday, occasions like maybe Thanksgiving, or different types of things. It could just be a nice picture that you both like that you're in, but it makes your partner who's in transition or transition, in the transition process doesn't want that up anymore. And your feelings about that, because, some people feel that their history is being erased also. And so it's a really important conversation. Okay, next slide. So these are some of the reflective questions. So I'm just going to throw out one of them because of time. What, where, and how do you both tell family members and friends about the transition? So some people choose to tell people alone. Some people choose to do together. Some people decide to say that they're going to have a priority order in which they tell people. And some people decide that they're not going to make an announcement. I know other people who made a video and then they just sent it to everyone that they love and care about. And so it really is an individual thing. And it's also up to you on how much you want family members as well as your partner, to be involved with any medical aspects of the transition or social aspects of the transition, maybe going clothes shopping with someone, or maybe going with them to a doctor's appointment. You might be more comfortable having a family member that do that than a spouse, or a spouse may not want to go, or you might not want your spouse to go with you. Okay, next slide. So this is just an example of deserving, distressing delights, and one is all about pampering and nurturing and self-care. It could be something as basic as taking a nap during the day. It can be as far as you can get a massage. It can be about going out to a nice restaurant by yourself. The point is to make sure that you put yourself on the list, especially during the time that you're navigating your spouse's transition. Next slide. And so this exercise is one of the empathy embracing exercises, and it's called Walk a Mile in My Shoes, and it's really focusing on gender dysphoria and how that can impact a relationship. And it gives the spouse who's not in transition the opportunity to view what it might be like to live in the body that does not align with who you are. It's very hard to actually understand what this would be like. I want to emphasize that there can be more than one person in a relationship in transition, and that both of them can still have different feelings and thoughts about their partner being in transition, because I just said the person who's in transition, but sometimes both people, or if it's poly relationship, many of the people in the relationship could be in transition. And that it should not be automatically assumed that because you are a person who is in transition, you're comfortable with everything about your partner transitioning. Okay, we can go to the next slide. And so this is a sample share. And so one of the partners answered the question for themselves. And so they lived, I've been out as a lesbian for almost 20 years. This is in the book. And when my partner transitioned, and I feel rooted in my queer identity, being femme, though often masks my queerness, and sometimes my partner was mistaken for a man. So sometimes I felt I passed as straight, while still living with the fear of homophobic violence. Since transitioning, I sometimes avoid using gender terms so that I don't have to feel like I am deceiving people. In other words, I am afraid of identifying myself as straight by gendering my partner as male, because I feel like it is a lie, like it's a lie, or not the whole truth. I have gained privilege to gain the privilege to identify as straight if I want to, which is more privilege than I had before for sure, and it's a powerful feeling. But I feel both ends of the spectrum have been padded, my privilege and my oppression, because my fear of violence against my family is heightened by the state of oppression that trans communities are under right now. It feels like I went back 20 years and I'm educating people all over again, except this time around on transgender issues. So there's all different types of views and experiences that are shared in the sample shares of the book. Okay, we go to the next one. And this is the couple communication corner. And so these are the type of, this is in the chapter 12 about partners and sex, and how will sexual attraction, I'm going to do the fourth question, how will sexual attraction play a role in your relationship? And both people will answer this question and talk about this. And this question is ever evolving, ever evolving. It's a very important question. And how, number three, like, will you use or what, will the use or use of toys or role play or kink or games play a part of your sex and your intimacy? It can be, are you going to have an open, is the relationship be monogamous or open or polyamorous or any other type? To really have these conversations, because this is something that is really challenging sometimes for some couples, and it's important to have the conversation. Okay, next slide. So I'm excited to say that I am part of a group of people who will put together, it's called the Partner Conference. It's happening on Saturday, December 4th from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and 7 to 3 Pacific Time and Standard Time. And this conference is virtual. It's for and by partners of folks who identify as trans, non-binary, and are questioning their gender. Mental health professionals and medical providers are welcome to attend, but they're going to have their own separate breakout groups. There's a wonderful team of people that are going to be presenters. I'm honored to say that I was asked to be the one who is the keynote speaker. It will be a different type of presentation than this because it'll be really only for partners. And the conference solely focuses on the needs, feelings, and voices of those in the relationship with someone who identifies on the transgender spectrum. Content will be based on topics that were important to the partners and to help provide a place for partners for navigating their own journey. So you can go to thepartnerconference@gmail.com, thepartnerconference@gmail.com, and just say that you're interested in information about this. And somebody from the team will get back to you. And I think from now to November 6th is like early enrollment because there's a fee, there's different pay scales. So just check it out. Okay, and next slide. This is the cover of Sex, and I already showed you that one, so you can go on. I haven't realized I put it in the slide. And again, if you want to get in touch with me, these are the books. And if you're interested, you can go to YouTube and see some of the monthly series that I do now. It's called Reflective Conversations on Gender Transition, an educational interview series. And it's for every month, we rotate every few months on speaking just to partners, speaking to parents and family members, speaking to educators. And then sometimes people are also authors or have advocacy groups. So any other questions? I'll be happy to take them.
Yeah, so I have one question that was asked earlier. The question was, how can I best support my spouse when they're experiencing dysphoria?
Great question. I mean, all the questions have been really powerful in the comments, I have to say. I wish we had more time to even delve into them more. So gender dysphoria, I think that what's important is to ask your spouse what they feel they need. Sometimes certain body parts are off limits when you're intimate. Sometimes using vocabulary while you're intimate helps the partner feel that more aligned with their body. It is important to also talk about what ways it's affecting them. Is it being misgendered brings up a lot for their gender dysphoria? Is it how they feel when they're moving in their body? Is it doing specific activities? Is it when they're around their children? Are they feeling that they're, how to handle how people perceive if they're the biological parents of their child or not, or ask inappropriate questions around that? There's always a gender dysphoria. It can be in social settings, it could be in intimate settings, it could be emotional. It's from what I understand, a person who's cisgender can never really understand what it feels like to be navigating and understanding your own gender in the process of figuring out your gender identity and your gender expression. People who are cisgender might maybe with certain aspects of things, but not if you identify in the transgender spectrum, or including non-binary. And so gender dysphoria is real. It's a feeling. It's an understanding inside that kind of like a betrayal of a person's body. And so it can cause a lot of suicidal thoughts and depression. It can also, when a partner is being close or intimate with their spouse who is experiencing gender dysphoria, some partners have shared that they themselves can feel rejected, or that their partner doesn't want to be with them. But it can really be not about the partner that they're about to be intimate with, it's about themselves. So conversation, some people bring in toys in intimacy settings. Some people, there's all different ways to address this. But I think if you are feeling this and you feel comfortable to talk a person who's in transition or experiencing this for themselves, to express it to their partner and let it in. Sometimes it's hard to find the words. I do know that. Any more questions? I'd love to have some. Well, thanks for putting that flyer up. That's very kind of you. If you roll it up a little, I don't know if you can, you'll see that Paula has been so instrumental in this, and Denise, and now we have some other people coming. When I get off this, I have a meeting with a group of people who are going to be additional presenters. So I'm excited to say there'll be a lot more diversity, BIPOC, and a lot more diversity than is shown just in our picture. As the three of us keep saying, we're going to throw more people on the poster. Anything else, Bethany?
I think we hit most of the questions in the chat.
Go ahead, ask me. Ask me.
I don't know if I see any more. Someone asked if there's conferences in Canada, and wasn't sure of the answer of that one.
Well, you mean
I feel like we hit most of them.
Well, there is one in Vancouver that happens on the west side of Vancouver. That one's great. There's also one of our presenters is from Canada, and she's a great resource, Denise. And so we are going at the partner conference. There is going to be people from all around the world attending. I don't know if that'll help. If you're asking for a partner one. I think
sure.
There's two more.
Another question that was asked was, I'm so sorry, my 2-year-old is right next to me. Do we ask therapists? How do we look for a therapist? How do we know if they're going to be able to help us with what we're experiencing in the LGBTQ kind of realm?
Great. We have to see how cute you should, maybe we shouldn't keep their privacy, but just say hi. I'll answer that question for you right now. Finding a therapist is very, very important. And so what I would say is that WPATH, the World Professional Association for Trans Health, has a mentorship program for therapists and mental health professionals. And I would really recommend that if a person is interested in working with partners of people who are trans or non-binary or some questioning their gender, that they go to a therapist that has been trained. And because a person has had experience with working with gay couples, doesn't mean that they're necessarily aware of how to work and help people who have specific needs and circumstances that they need to discuss that have to do with partners of people who are in transition. And so it's very important that a person does not think, they understand that there's a difference between gender and sexuality, and that people's needs, trans couples, couples that, some couples call themselves trans couples, so I use that term for people sometimes. I don't use that term for myself, but that's okay. And respect those that do. And so that there are couples therapists that they really ask them. I mean, I give people like some of the, there's a matching vocabulary game in the 5th chapter of my book, that the first book, word search. And I say, here's a sheet, answer these questions. I ask somebody what, I would suggest, and I mentioned to people when it might help them find a therapist, or they do it, when I used to do that more often, I don't do it now, is to say to somebody, what's stealth mean? What's the difference between transgender and non-binary? Come ask some of the vocabulary. If a person is familiar with the community, they will know. I also wanted to say that if you are working with a therapist that is not familiar with the trans community, I'm not recommending that you stop working with a therapist. That's not my business or my place, because there are plenty of therapists out there that might not be familiar, but are willing to go for training and willing to learn along the line with you as you are growing. But the point is that the partner does not need to educate the therapist. The therapist should come already with the tool set to help the partner. And, it's just like as a classroom teacher. We wouldn't go in and teach a lesson and ask the students to teach us the lesson. They teach us lessons, but you know what I mean. And that it is our responsibility, it is the therapist's responsibility to read books, to stay up on things, and to do their homework, so that a partner and a couple feel safe, and a person who's in transition and questioning their gender. I hope I answered that correctly. Ask them, interview them. And it's okay if it feels wrong, leave. And if you, have a conversation with that person and tell them, listen, this is upsetting me, this is bothering me, be candid. And always make sure that you get your needs met. And yes, the LGBTQ Center, there's lots of places that have lists of therapists. Again, sometimes it's hard now to find a therapist. So ask others, ask people who they go to, who they would recommend. Also, recommendations are great. And different forms of therapy. We always think that, one type of therapy, people go to art therapy. That's great. Music therapy. There's all different types of ways to explore your needs and your process. And there's plenty of people out there. Somebody said that they live in Atlanta, Georgia, and Paula, who's one of our presenters, she's from that area too. So again, go on groups and ask people in your area who are therapists or center that they might get people from. I hope I answered that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sure. So sweet. Thank you. Thank you so much.
I feel like we kind of hit most questions, unless there's any other last minute ones. And Dee, we really appreciate you being here tonight and sharing your knowledge. I'm particularly excited about the teacher workbook because I actually have a non-binary student in my classroom this year. And it's very difficult handling that as an educator as opposed to in my personal life. So I'm excited to get my hands on that.
Oh, thanks.
So
I just came from a training in Virginia, and I trained like a whole school district in Charlottesville, and we're continuing now. And, the high school I trained. And it is very important. And I say that, something that's very important is that a lot of things in schools are gendered. And that if we're really aware, we should role model students who are non-binary. I know this isn't about that. Another time, if you want me to talk about that, I can go on.
Yes,
and on.
no, I'm sorry.
And again, I apologize for the children. I'm not sure. I didn't know if you wanted children's book. I have to practice saying that last name out loud because I always have a challenge with it. But we all know everybody has a challenge with some things, and me, it's sometimes saying last names properly. So yeah. I hope this was helpful to somebody. And the goal of everything that I do, and I mentioned this earlier before we got on, is that we want to help save the lives of those who are identifying on the transgender spectrum, our spouses, our children, and our students. And that everything that I do is to help a person stay alive. And if I can be of service in some way and help save somebody's life to be part of that process, then everything's worth it. My day's complete.
Absolutely. I 100% agree.
Good day, right? I said, right. If you had a good day, sure. It's a good day if you help save somebody's life.
For sure. And Dee, thank you so much for being here tonight. Thank you again for sharing your knowledge. Thank you to all of you that took the time out tonight to join. Again, there's lots of resources on the Pennsylvania Trans Equity page. Also, on that page, there's more information about our monthly spouses meetup, which is the second Tuesday at 7:30 Eastern Standard Time. And either Corinne or I can get you the link for that. And we hope that this is helpful in some way. And we hope that everybody has a great night and that we'll see you again at a future workshop. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Have a beautiful evening, everybody.